So Diablo 4 is about to get a massive update in the upcoming couple of days with a developer live stream featuring Riker, Joseph Pipiora, and Joe Shelley, and I cannot wait. However, on this channel, I'm hyped about Diablo 4. I assume a lot of you out there watching the video, except for, the two of you that are calling the game trash and watching all these videos, we are excited for Diablo 4. And I want to talk about something that kind of implies a change in potentially the future of Diablo 4, and this is an idea posed in a recent video talking about the open beta feedback, and that is that players could be ruining Diablo 4 with their vocal opinions and kind of addressing sort of the designs of Diablo 4 and having the developers, because they care so much, it appears, change their game to kind of focus on this vocalization, which I think is an interesting discussion to have. And I want to address some of your comments as well as some of these posts out here that kind of talk about this, albeit post open beta. So this post is what kind of brought this discussion back recently, and it's been echoed throughout a lot of my videos. Now, I'm not particularly newly exposed to this idea. This is actually an opinion I've held for a very long time. And just to give you guys an example of this, when we're out chatting and talking about movies or games, and there's always this statement where it's like, if they just did this one thing, the game would be great, or how could they not see this? It was so obvious. And I've even said that, but if you take a step back, a lot of these companies, movies, development teams, they're paid millions, if not tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in totality to develop the game, right? And that means that they probably have a lot of skilled talent on there. So you can imagine your average person who has this average idea is probably not considering a lot of factors. And so I always tend to give the development teams the benefit of the doubt, even though I personally do have a lot of feedback myself. Now, this is actually an interesting idea because in Diablo 4, this idea where players aren't designing Diablo 4 seems to be kind of turning a new leaf. Now, there's a comment that I want to address before I dive into this a little bit more deeper, which is that this comment mentions that Blizzard is not known for taking too much stock in player feedback. That's what the opener of the Reddit post said. And they said that basically, yeah, WoW has been bleeding player base in the recent years, especially for Battle for Azeroth. For those that don't know, a lot of people are upset with those game systems. And then with Dragonflight, people are like, wow, they're listening and they're super quick to address player feedback, and they seem to be that way with Diablo 4. So this is definitely a new thing with Blizzard, as I've played a lot of Blizzard games over the course of my time, and generally speaking, they kind of do their own thing, and I think that's actually a good thing. However, as of recently in Diablo 4, they've released the open beta retrospective, and one of the most hot button issues, and I've made 2 videos now about this, is the reset dungeon button. Now, one video was just to basically explain, I don't think it matters that much, and I don't see why they removed it, but I also don't see why it absolutely needs to be in the game. And the second video was basically explaining that, well, a lot of people have a misconception about how Diablo 4 kind of progresses in terms of the leveling process and the endgame process. So it can be added back and it doesn't matter, and it also doesn't have to be added back and it doesn't matter, right? But I've seen a lot of people basically claim, well, it shouldn't be in the game at all, improves the game drastically, and I've seen the other opposite opinion, which is that it ruins the entire game. I think both these opinions are kind of awkward because of the way Blizzard, or Diablo 4 rather, is designed. And this is a perfect example of player feedback kind of getting in the way of Diablo 4's sort of development process. Now, I'm not saying that all companies should just ignore players entirely. I think that's also a wrong way to go about things. But to sit there and address every piece of feedback is not necessarily going to be a really good thing. For example, a lot of the more vocal players coming from D2 and PoE were saying that the font was trash. And now when they changed the font, and I've seen so many people say, why did they change the font? I really enjoyed that font. In the more minority communities, right? In terms of the vocal minority, where you have a lot of people basically exclaiming their experience from these more hardcore ARPGs, and they like to fit themselves into that category. But then you have the more, I guess you'd say, casual player who just wants to enjoy the game, and honestly is happy with Diablo 4's development and doesn't see this idea where they kind of need to make all these different changes. And to take a couple talking points here from the Reddit post, one thing is I'm seeing a whole lot of really bad cringe ideas from many players who generally dislike how Diablo 4 turned out, and they just want it to be more like PoE or something, I would say, or like Diablo 2, or even like Diablo 3. I've seen some of those comments as well. And then, of course, they say, call me a shill, call me a bootlicker, say that I'm rubbing it in, etc. But they have a very solid product, and we'll see. Not saying that they can't be disappointed, but I really enjoyed the leveling experience. This is exactly what my opinion has been. And I think that a lot of people come at this game and are coming from Diablo 2 or PoE and are kind of nostalgia blinded by these types of games or their experience in these games. Not that these games are bad by any means. I actually really enjoyed Path of Exile for the limited time that I've played it, and I've not really played Diablo 2 all that much, but I've also really enjoyed a lot of Diablo 3, and I've gone through and experienced the story for Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 entirely, and I actually really enjoyed all those games. The thing is, Diablo 4 is really, really different from these other ARPGs. Not because the systems in place necessarily are different, like, oh, well, we have to kill monsters. That's the basis of ARPGs, right? That core idea is the same, but they have this open world idea. They have side quests. They have the renown system. They have all these things that people immediately are like, this is trash. We don't want this, etc. Because maybe they just don't want that. But these are a lot of people coming from the ARPG community, right? And this ends up in a situation where it's like, do we want a lot of player feedback to be addressed and to change, or do we just want Diablo 4 developers to just go through and do exactly what they had planned to do rather than trying to change where they're going because of the player feedback? And I think this is a pretty funny post, honestly, because it is just straight to the point and absolutely blasts players. It's titled, "The Community Self-Aggrandizement is Staggering." Basically what that boils down to is sort of self-reputation, enhancing that self-importance, sort of that idea where they believe they are super intelligent or super I guess you could say skilled at ARPGs. And I'm gonna go ahead and have to agree with a lot of this post. The first comment that I want to mention is people who want a crazy challenge do not play ARPGs. And honestly, on a general level, I think this is true. I think that ARPGs in general, there's obviously skilled players and the top 1% that absolutely is mega brained. This is not a disputed fact, right? People like Woody Joe, people like Rax, people like Crip. These guys are very, very good in terms of analyzing the game and determining what kind of the best strategy is. No one's disputing that, and I certainly am not either. But I would say that in general, ARPGs are more of get in, kill monsters. And people who are trying to make it seem like, oh, I want this super complicated mechanics, etc., which is also another funny part about this post. they basically pull up Icy Veins or Maxroll open on a monitor. That's exactly just true, right? I mean, the people who are hardcore about the game absolutely have a lot of, I guess you could say, experience in looking up the best guides. Here's what the best builds are. They don't sit there and theoretically craft their build on their own. This is a general statement, of course, and there might be some people in the comments saying, no, actually I do this, and that's absolutely great. But those, I mean, the commenters already are the 1%. Most people either don't care and they're just going to kill monsters, or if you are, that maybe a top 10%, top 20% that do engage in terms of, I want to see what the best build is, I want to actually have a really, really nice crafted build, they're going to pull it up on a second monitor and they're going to be like, yeah, I'm really intelligent about the game. Yes, I know everything about the game, but they didn't really build anything in the game. They're just copying another build. Not to say that's anything bad. There's nothing bad with that. There's nothing bad. I think that's actually a really enjoyable way to play, and I do it all the time in a lot of my different games, right? But this idea that we should be taking player feedback and that this is what people want is a little odd, considering that realistically, most of the community kind of just follows the top players, and that's what they want. And so listening to players' feedback seems to be sort of, I guess you say, hypocritical in a way, but also not really conducive to a successful Diablo 4 future. And of course, people might not reach it to this part of this video, but I do think that player feedback is an important thing to keep in mind, and definitely to kind of, I guess you could say, understand what your player base wants. But you actually have to understand what your player base wants, not the vocal minority, not the few people that are speaking up. And I would say overall, most people are looking just to kill monsters and have an enjoyable experience doing so, which is why I think feedback like, hey, we don't like backtracking in dungeons, is actually a really nice piece of feedback. Even though I personally did not care, I do think that's actually a really, really good feedback to address, which is that a lot of people just want to play the core idea of an ARPG and Diablo 4, which is kill monsters. So let's change it so that we can kill monsters even more and even better, right? And I think that type of feedback is actually really, really good. But this idea that, hey, this font is bad, hey, this system is bad, hey, this isn't as complicated as we want it to be, I think those types of feedback you have to be very careful about addressing, because this could just be a very, very vocal minority who kind of want to turn Diablo 4 into another ARPG that they've played, where I think Diablo 4 is absolutely amazing as a standalone in the ARPG genre, where you have this open world, where you have several systems that are different. So it doesn't have to be a copy, although there are similar systems. I think Diablo 4 and the developers running it have actually done a really good job. And again, I will say for one final time, paying attention to player feedback is important, but you do have to know what's player feedback and what is offhand comments that are made by jaded players of the player base in your genre. So thanks for watching, guys. If you guys agree, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. I thought this was a very interesting topic because we have recently kind of gotten that big retrospective, and we are going to get, I believe tomorrow, a huge update, which I will be responding to in video format. I'm going to be reacting to it when that comes out, so stay tuned for that tomorrow. But I'm very curious to hear what we're going to have to basically have in terms of feedback, in terms of questions tomorrow, and we'll see if Blizzard plans on addressing more of player feedback, or if they're going to continue to go their own direction, because based on that retrospective, I could see them really diving in and addressing more player feedback, but we'll see. See you tomorrow.